The flashing blue and red lights in his rearview mirror were the last thing Mark needed today. As he pulled over, his son's medication rattling in the pharmacy bag beside him, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. One more problem on a mountain of troubles. What he couldn't possibly know was that this routine traffic stop would change everything, and Officer Sarah Bennett would soon become much more than just the woman who wrote him a ticket. If you're touched by stories of unexpected kindness and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that restore faith in humanity. Mark Reynolds gripped the steering wheel tightly as he watched the police officer approach in his side mirror. The dashboard clock read 6:47 p.m., he was already late picking up his son from the after-school program. Again. The program charged $1 per minute after 7 o'clock, money he simply didn't have to spare. "License and registration, please," the officer said, leaning down to his window. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Mark noticed her eyes first, a clear, perceptive blue that seemed to take in everything about his situation in one glance. "I know I was speeding, officer," Mark said, fumbling for his wallet. "My son's at after-school care, and I'm already late. I just picked up his medication and..." He stopped himself. Excuses wouldn't help, and he knew it. Officer Sarah Bennett took his documents and studied them carefully. "Wait here," she said, returning to her patrol car. Mark slumped in his seat. The inside of his 10-year-old Honda told the story his pride wouldn't let him share: fast food wrappers from too many drive-through dinners, a stack of past-due notices peeking from the glove compartment, and a framed photo of his late wife Claire clipped to the sun visor. It had been 18 months since cancer took her, leaving him alone to raise their 8-year-old son, Ethan. When Officer Bennett returned, she handed him a ticket along with his license and registration. "You were doing 47 in a 30 zone, Mr. Reynolds." Mark nodded, accepting the inevitable. "I understand." As he reached for the ticket, she leaned closer to the window and lowered her voice. "If you weren't married, I'd tell you about the clinic on Maple Street. They offer financial assistance for children's medications." She glanced at the pharmacy bag with its distinctive logo. "They've helped many single parents in tough situations." Mark looked up, confused. "I'm not," he began, then followed her gaze to Claire's photo. "Oh. I'm not married anymore. My wife passed away last year." Something shifted in Officer Bennett's expression. "I'm very sorry for your loss," she said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "The clinic opens at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Ask for Dr. Patel. Tell him Sarah sent you." Before Mark could thank her, she straightened up. "Drive safely, Mr. Reynolds. Your son needs you in one piece." As she walked away, Mark noticed she'd written something on the back of the ticket. It wasn't just the clinic information, she'd reduced the speed on the citation, cutting the fine nearly in half. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed, Mark sat at his kitchen table surrounded by bills. The mortgage was 2 months behind, Ethan's asthma medication costs had doubled, and the refrigerator contained little more than condiments and a half-gallon of milk. He'd been working double shifts at the warehouse whenever he could find childcare, but it was never enough. The next morning, Mark dropped Ethan at school and drove to the clinic on Maple Street. The waiting room was clean but modest, filled with families from all walks of life. When he mentioned Officer Bennett's name to the receptionist, her eyebrows rose slightly. "Sarah sent you? Take a seat. Dr. Patel will see you shortly." Dr. Patel turned out to be a kind-faced man in his 60s who listened intently as Mark reluctantly explained his situation. "Officer Bennett has a good eye for people who need a hand up, not a handout," Dr. Patel said. "We have a program that can reduce your son's medication costs by about 70%. And," he added, sliding a business card across the desk, "my daughter runs a free tutoring program that includes after-school care until 6:30. No late fees." Mark stared at the card, overwhelmed. Why would Officer Bennett do this? "She doesn't even know me." Dr. Patel smiled. "Sarah lost her husband too, line of duty, 5 years ago. She understands what it means to have your world turned upside down. She's been volunteering here since then." Over the next few weeks, Mark's life began to transform. Ethan thrived in the tutoring program, his medication costs became manageable, and Mark even found time to attend a support group for single parents that met at the community center. It was there, 3 weeks after the traffic stop, that he saw her again. Officer Sarah Bennett, in civilian clothes, arranging chairs in a circle. She looked different without her uniform, more approachable, though still with that same quiet strength. "You're the coordinator?" Mark asked, helping her with the last few chairs. Sarah looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes. Mr. Reynolds. How's your son doing with Dr. Patel's program? It's been life-changing, Mark admitted. I don't know how to thank you. You just did, she replied with a small smile. And please, call me Sarah when I'm not in uniform. The support group became a lifeline for Mark. Each week, he found himself looking forward to seeing Sarah, to hearing her gentle but practical advice for the group members. She never singled him out or gave him special attention, but sometimes their eyes would meet across the circle, and he felt understood in a way he hadn't since Claire died. One evening in late autumn, after the meeting ended, Sarah approached him as he was putting on his jacket. How are things really going? She asked quietly. Mark considered deflecting with his usual, fine, thanks, but something in her direct gaze made honesty feel like the only option. Better in some ways. Harder in others, he admitted. Ethan asked me yesterday if I was ever going to be happy again. Sarah nodded. Kids see right through us, don't they? What did you tell him? The truth. That I'm happier now than I was 6 months ago, and I hope to be happier 6 months from now than I am today. That's a good answer, she said. Progress, not perfection. They walked to the parking lot together, their conversation flowing easily from parenting challenges to favorite local parks. When they reached her car, Sarah hesitated. There's a community picnic this Saturday at Riverside Park. The police department sponsors it, free food, games for the kids. Ethan might enjoy it. Mark found himself saying yes before he'd even thought it through. Saturday dawned clear and cool. Ethan raced ahead to the playground while Mark scanned the crowd for Sarah. He spotted her helping at the grill station, still in uniform but with a casual ease to her movements. When she saw them, she waved and made her way over. You made it, she said, sounding genuinely pleased. Hungry? The burgers are almost ready. The afternoon passed in a blur of simple pleasures, watching Ethan win at the ring toss, sharing a picnic table with Sarah and some of her colleagues, feeling part of a community again. When Sarah's shift at the grill ended, she joined them on a blanket under a maple tree, its leaves a brilliant red against the blue sky. Dad, can Officer Sarah come to my soccer game next week? Ethan asked suddenly, looking up from his ice cream cone. Mark felt his face flush. Ethan, Officer Bennett probably has to work. Actually, I'm off next Saturday, Sarah interrupted. I'd love to come, if that's okay with your dad. Mark met her eyes, seeing something there that made his heart beat faster. We'd like that, he said softly. As autumn turned to winter, Sarah became a regular presence in their lives. She cheered at Ethan's soccer games, helped him with a science project about police work, and sometimes joined them for pizza and movie nights. Mark found himself sharing things with her he hadn't told anyone, his fears about failing as a single parent, memories of Claire, dreams he'd put aside when life took its unexpected turn. Sarah listened without judgment, occasionally sharing her own struggles with grief and rebuilding. They were careful, both aware of Ethan watching their growing friendship with hopeful eyes. One snowy evening in December, after Ethan had gone to bed, they sat on Mark's porch swing, mugs of hot chocolate warming their hands. I have a confession to make, Sarah said, breaking a comfortable silence. Mark turned to look at her, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. Should I be worried? She smiled. That day I pulled you over, I almost didn't write you a ticket at all. Why did you? Because I needed an excuse to talk to you, she admitted. If I'd just let you go with a warning, I couldn't have written down the clinic information without it seeming unprofessional. Mark laughed softly. So you gave me a ticket as a favor? I reduced it as much as I legally could, she protested, laughing too. And I saw something in your eyes that day, a good man drowning in circumstances, not asking for help even when you needed it desperately. You saw all that during a traffic stop. Sarah nodded. It's part of the job, reading people quickly. But seeing you with Ethan, watching how you fought to create stability for him despite everything, that's shown me who you really are. Mark set his mug down and tentatively reached for her hand. And who am I, Officer Bennett? She intertwined her fingers with his. Someone worth getting to know better. The snow fell harder around them, creating a quiet cocoon on the porch. Mark thought about the long, difficult road he'd traveled since losing Claire, the days when getting out of bed seemed impossible, the nights spent wondering how he'd ever make it through. He thought about the chance encounter with a perceptive police officer who saw past his speeding violation to the struggling human behind it. You know, he said quietly, when you whispered that comment about the clinic, I thought you were hitting on me at first. Sarah burst out laughing. Seriously? That would have been the worst pickup line ever. If you weren't married, I'd tell you about this discount medication program. Their laughter rang out in the snowy night, and Mark felt something long dormant stirring in his chest, hope, possibility, the sense that his story wasn't over yet, just turning to a new chapter. 6 months later, Mark stood in the same spot where he'd been pulled over, now decorated with streamers and balloons. Ethan bounced excitedly beside him, holding a handmade sign. They watched as Sarah's patrol car approached, her partner Officer Rodriguez driving while she looked confused in the passenger seat. When the car stopped and Sarah stepped out, her confusion turned to shock as she saw the small gathering of friends, Dr. Patel, members of the support group, colleagues from the police department, and at the center, Mark and Ethan. "What's going on?" she asked, walking toward them. Mark took her hands in his. 6 months ago, you pulled me over right here. You wrote me a ticket, but you also threw me a lifeline when I was drowning. You showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Mark continued. You came into our lives when we needed someone most, not to replace what we'd lost, but to help us build something new. Ethan and I talked about this a lot, and... He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Sarah Bennett, we're asking for your help again, this time, to complete our family. Will you marry me? Sarah looked from Mark to Ethan, who was now holding up his sign, please say yes. Dad already paid the ticket. Through her tears, Sarah laughed. Yes, she said, pulling Mark to his feet and into her arms. Yes to both of you. As their friends applauded and Ethan launched himself into a group hug, Mark reflected on how a moment that had seemed like just another hardship, a traffic ticket he couldn't afford, had actually been the beginning of his second chance at happiness. Later that evening, as they celebrated with a small dinner at Mark's house, soon to be their house, Sarah pulled the original ticket from her wallet, preserved all this time. I kept it, she admitted. My partner thought I was crazy, but something told me that traffic stop was important. Mark took the worn paper, looking at her handwriting on the back, not just the clinic information, but a note he'd never noticed before, everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. As Ethan regaled their guests with his version of how his dad and Sarah met, she arrested him, but then decided to keep him instead. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look of profound understanding. Life rarely followed a straight path. Sometimes it took detours, wrong turns, and yes, even traffic violations to lead you exactly where you needed to be. 3 years later, Officer Sarah Reynolds still occasionally patrolled the same stretch of road where she'd first met her husband. Sometimes, when passing that particular spot, she'd smile to herself, remembering the desperate single dad with the pharmacy bag and the photo of his late wife. She never could have imagined that a routine traffic stop would lead to a blended family of 4. Ethan now had a little sister, Emma, who had her mother's clear blue eyes and her father's determined spirit. Sarah had learned that second chances came in many forms, and sometimes the most meaningful connections began in the most ordinary moments. And whenever she pulled someone over who seemed to be carrying too heavy a burden, she remembered to look beyond the violation to the human being behind it. Because sometimes, what people needed wasn't a ticket, it was someone who saw them, really saw them, and offered a hand when they were falling. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections and second chances. Remember that kindness can change lives in ways we never anticipate, and sometimes, the most meaningful relationships begin in the most unlikely circumstances.